Do you have confirmation that Felix is gonna be here?
He's on the agenda, so I assume, but I can ask. Usually comes in person. It could be online. I think she's unsure. Oh, do you want to check and see?
I can text them.
Look at the people and see who else online, so we know who's,
Oh, you want to see on this side?
yeah, I'm just trying to see who's here.
Yeah. Felix isn't here, but. There's nothing else. This is where it's at. Dave joined us. People banging on the door. Okay. We are going. We are going to get started. We're actually going to press record today. Owen has pressed it because last week I did not press record and it is definitely recording. Interesting to be getting another message from Meg saying, don't forget to press record. Because last week was a miss, obviously. Glad that all of you guys could make it. We're not sure who will be attending since this is a holiday for some people and some people it is not. But we will have our land acknowledgement from Owen this morning, and then we will dive into the agenda. That was sent. Hopefully everybody did receive it.
Good morning, everyone. Happy Indigenous Peoples Day. Our meeting today is gathered on the unceded territories of the Dena'ina Athabascan people. Today, I'm thinking about Sealaska Heritage Institute, who recently discovered a stonefish weir off Prince of Wales Island dating back 11,000 years, which puts an archaeological record on Indigenous inhabitation of what's now known as Alaska 1,000 years older than previously thought. I bring this up today because in the Western world, it's often said that civilization was founded on agriculture. And I want to bring attention to the fact that Indigenous people all over the world found sustainable and right relationship with the land that allowed them to harvest what they needed. And also to bring attention to the fact that Indigenous people had complex understanding of salmon migrations and the technology needed to harvest enough fish to feed large populations that continue to exist in this area. So I want to express gratitude to the Indigenous people of Alaska for continuing to help us understand how we can be in right relationship with the land and each other. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Owen. Appreciate that. It's a piece of news I hadn't heard. So that's cool. Well, I don't think Felix is online and he's not here in the room. So we're gonna kind of jump past that in hopes that maybe he does join us a little bit later. So let's go, looks like we need to send an agenda out.
I think everybody got it, but for some reason, Trish didn't get it. Did everybody else receive the agenda?
I got it attached to the Outlook invite. I had to open up the Outlook event and then I saw it attached there.
Chris says he's not getting the meeting invites either.
Should. And it's the same one. We will make sure that works.
Okay, well, so we're gonna skip over the update from Felix since he's not here. And I kept on the agenda a few minutes just to talk about any urgent shelter issues, even though that is not the focus of the task force. If there are any urgent issues that need to be passed on, I wanted to make sure I left a little bit of time on the agenda to be able to do that. So I will open that up in case anybody has any urgent issues. Hearing none. I have started just keeping track of the action list from week to week, and I just want to confirm that the 3 action items from last week were completed. So I think Lisa did share the MOA insurance requirements. Is that out on the website for people to see? Okay. And then Taria, you indicated that the coalition had gotten some updates on the issues from the municipality. Do you want to share what you learned?
Yes, I will share my screen. So, do you want me? Okay. Do you want me to share before Lisa shares any new things, or? Because Lisa is on.
Lisa, did you have anything new to share? Didn't raise her hand, so I'm assuming not. So why don't you go ahead, Lisa, if you do have something, just raise your hand and we'll make sure you get in to speak.
Lisa, my question is, were you able to receive a waiver for the insurance requirement? You might not be able to hear, and that's okay. All right, we will move forward. So there were a few questions that we were asked to get the answers to. One from Parks and Rec and the other from Alexis Johnson. And so I will pull those up as they are a little lengthy in response, but I want you, some of you are visual and I want to be able to supply that. So here we go. So when we're talking about, we ask the question, is there an opportunity to have a waiver for the new insurance requirements for emergency shelter since the municipality has an obligation to provide shelter? And what is that process? So Alexis's answers were individual providers can request waivers to specific parts of insurance requirements. We will put those forward to the risk manager for approval. However, we wouldn't be able to waive all requirements. One issue we're seeing on our end is that a barrier is that the assembly uses the word contracts rather than using grants. Higher insurance requirements are triggered for contracts rather than grants. For instance, Covenant House was put forward by the assembly as a contract, and those insurance requirements are higher than for a grant. Everything else Covenant House has with us are grants, and the S is AHD. If in the future we could have earlier communication on what the assembly is planning to put forward, we could possibly save both AHD and the contractor or grantee some time and efforts. I would also say that our stance is that the insurance requirements are there to protect both the provider, the grantee, our contractor, and the city. Please let me know if you have any additional comments or questions or ideas moving forward. So I see Lisa couldn't get off mute, but if we can address, does anyone have, because there are a lot of parts and they're lengthy, if you're okay, Belinda, Can we just see if we have any questions about this specific requirement or insurance? And hopefully it's big enough for people to see. But I did read it verbatim.
Was there any follow-up with anyone with regards to whether the use of the term contract was intentional versus something not understood as driving those requirements? 'Cause that's kind of what it sounds like to me, rather than going back and raising the flag that, maybe if you change the word, we could lower the requirements.
So
Makes
you're asking-
sense.
Is that the question now?
Yeah, I think we need to start trying to be problem solvers, not obstacle finders.
Does anyone know if we can do that from any of their experience? Or do I
I
just need
think,
to?
I think in asking that question of the administration, I think we do need to have some idea of what their policies and procedures are around sub grants versus subcontracts. So like I can speak for Rural Cap that we have a policy for sub recipients, which would be sub grantees, and a whole different set of policies for subcontractors. And we also have that same issue, I guess, that we have different insurance requirements, but it's because they're procured differently. So this is going to go back to procurement policies and procedures and how those different things happen in terms of which route they go. So it could have been very deliberate that they were issued as contracts, not grants, because of the nature of them being sole sourced. There may be internal municipal policies about sole sourcing grants versus sole sourcing contracts. And I would just hate to see us ask to have them switch to grants and then suddenly be up against procurement issues on it.
I think that's an easy thing for an assembly member to ask this, the assembly attorney, and get an answer today. Is there an assembly member on? Is Meg here?
No, she's
No.
not. We let Roger in.
I've been
Maybe
trying.
it won't
We've
let
done
you.
it like
About
5,
10
6
times, yeah.
Okay.
There's an
I've-
issue on Roger's side.
Yeah, so I just want to put this in the room maybe for as other issues come up is as we ask questions or try to run down information, let's come at it from the standpoint of how can we overcome the problem? How can we solve the problem? Not just gather information and report back. Because that leaves an obstacle in place for another week. And I think that, I'd request that for the folks from the administration that are online that are trying to help as well is tell us what the issues are and then also offer, here are some possible ways to overcome this obstacle. And let's try to do that a little bit faster rather than wait week to week to put rocks in the way.
So the next part was about the fact that the task force recommended 3 meals a day be provided in emergency shelter facilities. And then so the question was, there was 2 questions, which is, can you provide the rationale for AHD requiring 1 meal a day only in the AHD administrative policies and procedures and in the ITB? And then the second question was, are there still requirements or specifications for vendors? If so, can you provide that document and state what those are? 1 meal a day, this is Alexis's answer, was added to the current contracts as Emergency Shelter Title 16.120, does not require any meals and only requires warm beverages and snacks. We added 1 meal and are working with contractors if there are additional need of meals for their facilities. Aviator is assessing whether they'd like to add a meal, dinner, but thus far, AHD has not received a request to do so. Additionally, emergency shelter is intended to save lives when it is below 45 degrees or for 2 other categories of declared emergencies. We work with each provider to get them to your optimal solution, but adding requirements would be prohibitive to vendors' willingness and ability to operate an emergency shelter. The bare minimum is what is in code. AHD works to have a better solution. But in the end, it is up to the emergency cold weather shelter if they want to provide meals beyond what is required by code. For example, at Sullivan, another meal breakfast was recently added. Additionally, they are providing a sack lunch, which can be taken with the clients to work. Both Aviator, 99+1, and Henning all report an excessive amount of waste with 3 meals a day, with the lunch meal being identified as one that is least used and has the most waste. Over half of the meals or are thrown in the garbage per day after storage in a refrigerated area for 1 to 2 days. Therefore, in working with the contractor, they have been providing sack lunches on top of one meal since day one. And in the chat, Andrea Nestor from the Health Department states that Aviator does have dinner now. And there's another question, which is, what is the process for procurement of meals? We do have the operator of Sullivan and Aviator on, which is Henning Inc. And we also have the AHD representative. So if anybody can come off mute and answer Lisa's question, we'd be grateful.
We received bids from different food providers that we reached out to. And so we made a choice on who would be able to provide the most nutritious meals for the best price. And that's how we identified an operator to provide the meals.
Thank you, Sean. And if you haven't met Sean, this is Sean. She's the owner. Sean, can you introduce yourself? I don't want to get it wrong. I apologize.
My name is Sean Hayes, and I'm the founder of Henning Incorporated. We started up back in 2020 and am now providing services at the Aviator Hotel, the former guest house in the Sullivan Arena, and the next at the Alex Hotel, hopefully, or the Golden Lion.
Thank you. There's another question in the chat, and I don't think Lisa can come off mute, so thanks, Lisa, for typing it. Is it a bid process? Beans would very much like to be able to bid.
It was not a formal bid process. We just worked with a local guy who was doing meals at the guest house, and then a couple of other vendors that showed interest. But ultimately, there was no bid process.
Thank you. And so what we're hearing is that there are sack lunches and there are other ways that people can be provided meals at the site. Do we have any further questions, or how can we get to, as Belinda said, the recommendation of 3 meals a day, or are we feeling satisfied as a group with the response here?
I just want to say, I think the idea of the sack lunches is a great idea, because that does allow people to take lunch with them if they have a job or if they have a place that they go during the day and still be able to have access to nutrition. So I was really happy to hear that.
Thank you, Jessica.
Drea, this is Nancy. I just wanted to put a note in that I think that there are national standards, and it's clear that our code seems to be missing information on nutrition, and that someone, maybe the health department or someone, would look at national code. I'm also wondering about bid requirements for subcontractors, but I don't think that's our lane, but I think there is a requirement for public bid process with public funds. So I think that somebody should think about that.
Thank you, Nancy. What do you think of that?
This is Andrea. I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we just can't see the hands.
Oh, okay. So the process after it has been given to the contractor is for them to use their bids. So they do a bid. It doesn't have to be a formal bid process through contracting, because Henning was awarded that contract. So when we talk about meals, they found different vendors to bid on it, and then they chose the one that they felt was best. That is within the contract and allowable.
You. All right, for the final question that we asked was, is HMIS required for all emergency shelter contracts, i.e. Sullivan Arena and or any other emergency sheltering options? So the answer was, thus far, every contractor already had access to HMIS and has set up projects and are using HMIS. We do not require it in the contract, as we will not stop or fail to provide emergency shelter because of HMIS. Although HMIS is strongly encouraged, if a group who currently does not have HMIS access is willing to provide emergency shelter, we will work with them and ACH to figure out how to get them into HMIS, HMIS access. Currently, the projects that are set up for emergency shelter, Covenant House for the gym, they must also fill out the emergency shelter sheet and get a fire inspection. And clients are not normally housed in the gym and therefore is not currently approved for overnight usage. This is not a difficult process, but the fire department must sign off on using the gym for overnight occupancy. Henning Sullivan Congregate, they have a project set up and though it was not running the first few days, they will be putting all data from the start of the shelter into HMIS. I have also told them they must do coordinated entry assessments. Henning Sullivan Warming, for those they can get data on, but they will be entering these individuals into the warming area project. And then we will ensure that there is a project set up for the Golden Lion and Alex Hotel as well when those come online. But I think one of the things noted for the response, I mean, if we go in order, it's going to be that, you know, the task force made the recommendation that HMIS should be a part of the contract to ensure that every contractor is following through with putting the data into HMIS. It is an extra task, as we know, and not having it contracted can pose to be a barrier. But in this case, Henning had already set those up even before the project was stood up. So they are entering the data in there. I know that for the project, as far as the Sullivan and then the Aviator 99+1 was doing that data, and now Henning has their own project to do that data also. Since we have Henning on, Henning, are you guys doing the coordinated entry assessments?
We are not now, but we are willing to now that we're all set up.
And we know that that takes time, but I do understand that your staff, some of your staff are already trained in coordinated entry assessments, correct? Awesome. And she's saying, she's
Yes,
shaking her
that's
head.
correct.
Okay, great. So then one of the things, and we'll talk about it more later when we look at demobilization, but for in case someone has to drop, having those coordinated entry assessments completed and making sure we do this in a timely manner across all sites to make sure everyone either has updated ones or that they're in the system is really going to be beneficial as these housing options come online so that we're doing it in an equitable manner. So as we had did that with EHV, we looked at who was on the CE assessment list and we went directly from the list. And instead of doing it by location, which is what we have been housing people by, is like, what's the most critical need, i.e. Centennial or Aviator when we were in decomposition. We really want to use the CE list for those housing needs. And it is what we consider best practice from HUD to really utilize CE in that capacity. So if we can, I know there will be meetings, but if we can make sure in the next, few months that everybody, or actually Meg's going to tell you in the next 7 days, but in the next definitely couple of weeks, wanting to make sure that everyone that is in those current sites and coming into the sites has a CE assessment or CE update. And then our list is actually current. So do we have questions about the first part about HMIS or anything to get us to a better understanding or where we need to be moving forward there? Allison, I know you jumped on a little late. Can you give us, there was an update here about Covenant House. Are you all set to go for your emergency shelter?
Yeah, although I was trying to get it confirmed, I was talking to someone today and she said that there might be a challenge, but we signed the contract. I know that the last couple of days we've had young people 23, 24 in the space. So to me, I think it's all going well unless I hear otherwise. And I text them, so I'm trying to get a confirmation.
Thank you, Allison. Okay. And then the other thing, the last thing was the warming area project. So one of the recommendations, and really wanted to ask the task force, what they thought about it, was we know that we have this robust outreach project coming. And we're trying to make sure that all our street outreach is under one umbrella. So instead of having these separate projects, we're able to track all unsheltered in one umbrella. And so when we're looking at what we thought was going to be the warming tent, or now maybe warming area, capturing that data in the street outreach project and not a separate project. Because really, we want to make sure that those individuals who are in the warming area, they are unsheltered. So there could be training provided to capture those individuals as unsheltered in that specific project. So we're able to present that data accordingly. And it still would track who had access to your warming area that would be at Sullivan. So wanting to bring that idea to the task force or if someone else had an idea on how to better track, as we know we have not been tracking unsheltered, but ensuring that the warming area was under one project versus a separate one.
Andy Nestor with the Health Department has your hand up.
Yes, I think that's a great idea, Taria. I'm just trying to figure out, so they have the separate project set up under the warming shelter. So is this like adding them onto your project for street outreach, or how does that work?
Yeah, so what's really neat is it's not ACH's project necessarily. It is the project for all teams that would go under street outreach. So it's not belonging to one person. Instead of right now, we have all separate outreach teams having their own separate project. So it would just be a different access point.
The thing that might be complicating for it is that a lot of times when people come to the warming shelter, it is a very short period of time before they get a bed, because just like last night, they had about 30 people in the warming shelter. And then they were able, after the 10 o'clock time frame, they were able to then move all but 10 of those people into a bed. So they're there for just a very short period of time. So I'm not sure how well that is going to, if that's going to create dirty data, because then they're going to go into an emergency shelter. It's kind of like a rotating thing with the warming area. Just a thought to put out there.
I know we have a wonderful data committee, so definitely maybe put that. Belinda, do you have a suggestion?
Yeah, so I guess I don't want us to get distracted working the current issues when the focus of this effort is supposed to be on the next 90 days. And so, I kept this item on the agenda, but it really is just a quick 10 minutes to raise issues that need to be worked outside of the room. So let's not work them here.
Got it.
Let's identify them and then work them offline so that we can get back to the longer term focus that this team needs to be on.
So we want to put that for data committee, and Celia did just walk in the room, so.
Sorry,
it's
my
okay.
apologies.
You're fine. I'll fill you in on that data need.
Yeah.
Great.
I have one thing,
It was
what
on
is
the agenda for
ICA? ICA is awesome.
They are the HMIS vendor for Alaska HMIS.
They are the system administrator. The vendor is technically Ball Sky.
Oh,
Sorry,
Close enough.
Close.
close.
Thanks.
Okay, that moves us right into the discussion of the revised charter, which I think got sent out last week. Is that right, Taria?
I sent out with the agenda, so if you open the attachment, both of the things are there.
So I'm just gonna hit the highlights. We talked about it last week and I just mentioned it again here, but I'm gonna run through what the key changes are. So we revised the charter of this group for what I'm calling phase 2. And phase 2 being continuing to vet and come up with the best options for the tier 2 emergency shelter plans. And so those are the sites that could not be online by October 1st. But there was some additional work that needed to be done, and they might be able to come online within the next 90 days and then be able to take Sullivan and return to normal service, really. So that is the main focus of the task force for the month of October. Couple of key dates. This is moving on us really fast. We're looking to make recommendations for those tier 2 sites to the Assembly Housing and Homelessness Committee next Wednesday, so October 19th. And then at the October, I think I've got the date right, at the October 25th regular Assembly meeting, those recommendations would be made to the Assembly and to the mayor, to the administration. And so we're on an even faster pace with this effort than we were with the phase 1 effort. We also added a work effort around the DMO planning, and we've added that to the agenda, and we'll talk about that a bit more today. Anybody have any comments or questions on the revisions to the charter? Questions about the purpose of the task force going forward? So I'm seeing in the chat that we've got Andy that's not part of the invites. I think we've seen a handful of folks that somehow have fallen off the invites. If
I'm
somehow
just
you found out
re-forwarding.
about the meeting and that's the case, email to Rhea. And is there a way we can go back and look at rosters from one of the last task force meetings and make sure we haven't missed anybody?
It's the same 59 people, so I don't know if it's like a technology glitch, but it was only 3 people that haven't got it.
Okay,
So I just think that it's, this happens to be those 3 folks.
okay.
But,
We'll make sure.
and Jessica has some, maybe some help for those that aren't getting in.
Yeah,
Jessica.
sorry, I was just saying, once I accepted it, I never got another email again. But if I go into my Outlook calendar and click on the event, then I always see the new attachments. So it's kind of a weird thing. Once you've accepted it, it's like it's gone for you. You never get email updates ever again.
So probably emailing out information would be better as just a separate email than an Outlook.
I think so. Instead of attaching it to the Outlook event, just sending a whole new email with all of the attachments would be nice.
Good advice. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move into the committee updates. And the first one, facility and site evaluation. So, and John's here in the room. What's the latest and greatest on potential tier 2 sites?
Only 2 things came up. One is the Old Alaska News Agency warehouse at off of C Street, and I think maybe Potter is on the market, and that has all the drawbacks of any warehouse, but it's quite large. The location is somewhat reasonable. I don't know, C Street, I think there are buses down there, so we haven't got beyond that. I don't know the price. I don't have the specs on the size, but it was really big, 2 stories, lots of offices. And then the Arctic Rec Center that we've got on our tier 2 list, and it's been there for a while, went on the market at the end of last week. So it's officially on the market. I think it's at $12 million. It's 26,000 square feet total, has 2 gyms, has some showers. I think Chris Schutte, if he's on, is trying to set up a tour for probably Wednesday to go through it and trying to get a schematic for the layout to get square footage on stuff. But it's also on, I think, 3 acres or so of land. So that offers a big opportunity potentially, where we get that, to have housing on there and have it combined with the Lowberry Shelter, navigation and housing there. So a lot of appeal to that location. Meg is aware and asked the locations task force or committee to kind of go down a checklist of what the pros and cons are for it. So we're prepared to do that. And there is, we're working, obviously Tudor Elmore's moving forward, and kind of in my mind, that when it was dropped to 150, implicitly said we need 2 low-barrier shelters, because I think our need has been shown to be about 300, 350. So I don't know if this is, either or discussion with Tudor Elmore, or, oh, this is perhaps an addition. So my approach will be, let's just evaluate this on its own merits as a location.
On any of the other sites that were identified as potential tier 2 locations to open in 90 days, are any of them still in play?
I think so. The one on Fairbanks Street that was the old GCI call center, and I have not pursued that. I handed that off to Larry Baker, who had some interest in it. I think at some point on any of these, someone from the administration needs to get involved because, they have a little more official authority as opposed to someone who's a member of a subcommittee of a task force. So, but I haven't heard back from Larry on where he's gone with that.
Are there any other locations that,
That's, I think others may be simmering, but I haven't had any notice of progress. And things come on the market. I mean, it's a lively market out there.
John, any thoughts on the recommendation to be made to the Assembly Subcommittee next week based on that?
Yeah, we should have more information on the Arctic Rec Center for sure, and on the Alaska News Agency and on that Fairbanks Street location. So we'll have to be able to have an update. I don't know if it's a clear path, but either of those is a viable place. So that's certainly something to chew on.
Chris in the chats pointed out that there are 16 acres that come with the Arctic Rec Center purchase.
Thank you, Chris.
Anybody have anything else for the sites, facilities evaluations group? Okay, any update on operations plans and estimates?
Jessica, I believe that's your group, but are you waiting, or I'll let you speak to that?
Yeah, like I reported last week, still waiting on some of the tier 2 sites to make it a little further in the process. We are continuing to look at, we talked about this more at the beginning of the meeting, but look at best practices and ways that we can ensure that people are continuing to move within the HPRS and along the continuum as we stand up facilities, making sure that the outreach staff are still engaged and that we are still working towards that ultimate goal of housing everyone. So just that update, and look forward to having more information on tier 2 sites so that we can do some pro formas for them.
Is there any way that, or do you have any upcoming meetings that maybe AHD can join and have a conversation before our next meeting about the differences in the operations budget, like for the NAV Center versus what you guys might have put together for your pro forma?
Yeah, we don't have anything scheduled right now, but I'm happy to schedule something so that we can have that conversation. I can reach out to the committee, include the health department, and see what people's availability is for this week.
Great, thanks. I know it's only one day a week. It's a little hard when we're doing 1 day a week versus the 2. Not saying we should do 2, but it's interesting to keep track.
Yes.
Thank you. That's all I had, Melinda.
Okay, let's talk about Sullivan Demo. So we added that as a line of work last week. Who has picked that up? Does anybody in the committee for task force pick that up, start working on it?
So ACH needed some more information, but I can tell you what we have now, and I can kind of share that is 2 things. One of the things was looking for like a graphic or something from HUD. So the task force, for those that don't know, are better kind of informed of what are we looking at. And it's pretty much what I said previously, which is it really revolves around CE. So I found this really great graphic. I believe in visuals. So you have your inflow, and you can come in from non-congregate, shelter, emergency shelter, congregate, outreach. Everyone needs to be in your coordinated entry system. And then your outflow is directly into these things. Whereas it either permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, transitional housing, affordable housing, I feel like there should always be another one, especially as we are talking about demobilizing for Sullivan, which unfortunately might be emergency shelter, but that is not what HUD is focused on. HUD is focused on housing, and therefore this graphic is more about housing and making sure, and then these parts on the end are more part of our HPRS. We did this work before, so when we were talking about this is the work that, you know, the coalition in partnership with many partners kind of took on before Sullivan closed the first time in June 30th, where we were talking about what does a successful closure look like? The same thing with the facilitated group. They were also having the same conversations. So this process of demobilizing isn't really any different. We just need to know where people are. So then the other part that might be helpful for this group, which we did do, and I'm gonna try to see how I can share. Somebody's asking a question before I share the next thing.
Jessica Park says maybe a box that is special needs shelter if a client needed to be navigated to complex care or a different shelter that is better for their individual needs.
Okay. I will add that. Thanks, Jessica. So the other thing that was helpful, I think, last time when we were looking at demobilization was a timeline. And I'm glad we have other people on the call that have better memories or knowledge than I do, because I don't know if I have some of my numbers right. And I'm trying to see if I can get it bigger for you guys on the screen. Okay, so if we're looking at October and, you know, and we're talking about where we're at now. So at the top is kind of where we're currently at and what's currently happening. So we have the Sullivan Arena that is a low barrier shelter for 150 occupancy. And I'm pushing that one all the way through. I know that the, I don't know anything actually. I'm assuming the funding stream stops in December, because I believe we asked for a 90-day prediction. But I pushed it all the way to February of 2023, just for numbers' sake. You have your Aviator non-congregate shelter currently at 225 rooms. According to the slide at a work session, I believe on 9/7, there will be a drop off in February. This is the number I think I have wrong. So someone can let me know, but I believe they were going to go from a 225 rooms to 169 rooms. Am I correct or no? So that's either the health department or Henning or anybody that might be in the know. I couldn't see the slide. Anyhow, somebody can let me know later. And then there is BFS that has that, and Covenant House that have the additional capacity for emergency shelter. And of course, the Landlord Housing Partnership, which is leveraging housing this entire time frame. What's going to help possibilities on the bottom are the ARPA funds that had housing for hotel conversions of 120 beds, or units is what it should be. And then the Navigation Center, which I didn't go to the work session on Friday, so I don't know if the February date is still the timeline, but if it is, adding that 150 there. And then of course, hopefully by December, housing at the Golden Lion, which is 85 rooms, which is up to 170 persons. And that would be just if you took 85 and times it by 2. So as you can see, if we're looking at, again, the assumption for this task force was always 350 unsheltered persons. Right now, currently, we have 295 beds for emergency shelter. And then I did put the non-congregate beds here. But as we stated in a different work session, the 225, those folks are really, it's more of a stable population. We're not really seeing a lot of inflow here. I think you see, and we have the experts on the line that can say differently if I'm saying it wrong, but you're seeing maybe 2-3 people come in, you know, or maybe 5 a week versus having these open beds for the 350 like we are talking about planning. Yes. And Jessica talks about the capacity map that is updated online. It's a great resource also. So then when we're moving on and we lose the 169 or lose rooms at the Aviator, as you can see, the need is that we're going to have to fill that delta, which goes into our planning for decomposition. This is why I bring it up. So if we're looking at the next 90 days, it seems like we're looking at more, needing more emergency shelter beds in that time frame, but not in January, in February, if we're right by the assumption on the timeline.
So I'm wondering on these DMO topics, if we can get a subgroup established like we have for the others, so that you're working the issues in between the meetings, and then at the meetings, reporting out, giving updates, raising any problems where you need additional help, because it's not really working the issue in this meeting is really not effective. So is there a group of people that it would make sense to come together to work on the Sullivan DMO plan, and who should that be?
Is there someone that wants to work that? I know we're at 12:17.
I don't want to like raise my hand and volunteer for that, but it does make sense that it's kind of adjacent to the operations committee work, because it's essentially how the operations end. So I think that it does make sense that maybe it's a Venn diagram with a large overlap of the operations subcommittee.
Correct, and I see HD. So if you're interested and you want to send an email or put it in the chat, then we can get that on the books so we can have something to report. Is that what you're asking for, Belinda? By Monday?
I think getting a committee set up today to start doing the work, so that by next week you're getting a report.
It is just, I will tell you this, when you're looking at demobilization, it is hard when we don't have facilities that know like how many it will hold. So, but the timeline, and I see Nancy's gonna volunteer.
I will volunteer to be on that work group as well. I would ask that the task force might consider not just a systems level timeline, but a client-centered timeline. Saying that 6 weeks before clients are told they have to leave an emergency shelter site, they are informed of the closure date, that there are services brought in specific to working with clients based on that closure date, with a goal of replacing those people either into shelter or housing, so that communication lines are kept open with clients. As a part of our recommendations, I think it's important we think about the people staying there.
Right.
This is a great systems timeline, but I'm like, who is going to be on the receiving end of this? And they can't see this timeline. You know, this timeline won't be helpful to them.
Well, yes, and where they're going next, correct.
Yeah, so I'm happy to work with the Sullivan DMO work group.
Thanks to Jessica for stepping in and volunteering to at least lead through the startup of this group. And I think we've got a handful of folks in the chat that have indicated they want to join. I think, Jessica, you've seen them, but I've got Jessica, Andy Nestor, Nancy Burke, Owen Hutchinson, Taria, someone from Henning, and I guess Sean, you'll let us know who that's going to be, and then Rob Marks. Okay, and if you're thinking about it, contact Jessica and/or Taria to get engaged with that work. And I realize what you're dealing with right now is kind of like Jell-O, because you don't have a lot of answers. But I think coming together as a group and starting to put your minds together about what it's going to look like and what the questions are and how you're going to go about it, having that plan in place before the date hits is going to make it go a lot smoother. And then as you get information, as you know what's potentially coming out of the sites group, start working through those as opportunities. Okay, that makes sense?
Roger, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I'm having trouble accessing chat, but I just wanted to volunteer to be on the DMO committee too.
Awesome.
Thanks, Roger.
Thank you.
And Terry from Sala. Anybody else have anything on the Sullivan DMOB kind of planning effort? Then we'll switch to the Aviator here in a second. I don't see anybody raise their hand or have anything else on Sullivan. We're gonna move to the Aviator. Roger, is your hand still up or, oh, there you go. Thank you. Okay, Aviator Hotel. We were gonna start off with an update from the Solid Group, and I appreciate you all being here, and it looks like you're ready to share.
Yes, thank you. And as of October 1st, SOLA is currently not staffing medics at the Aviator. With that being said, we feel that we've had a positive impact on the residents during our time there at the Aviator. And we also feel that we brought added value to that facility specifically and other facilities that we've worked with. And just to just make everybody aware that our services are available still if requested.
Thank you. Are there any other updates on the Aviator? Do we have the current anticipated timeline for the Aviator? Is it still what was shared with the assembly about a month ago?
Well, that's what I was asking before, but I didn't get an answer, so we can dig deeper maybe in our subgroup.
Okay.
We had to pull it, we had to pull it
We
out.
got the numbers pulled up now, so by October, by the end of October, we're supposed to be at 151 for the step down. Right now, we do, I think we have 189. 109 people at 89 people at the Aviator.
And if you look at the contract right now, it is written through October. You'll see that appropriation going to the assembly tomorrow for the Aviator. And there's a possibility of 1 4-month extension through April. But also realize that when we start getting to the end of February, the capacity that the Aviator can hold is significantly reduced to, I think, 47.
Are we saying 47 rooms? I think that was my question, is how many, because you guys did this wonderful graph, but I could not find it anywhere of how many rooms over the period of time. And if this isn't the time for that, Belinda, then maybe we can just ask to have that slide at the next meeting.
It's really, really easy. I have it in my brain if you want to write it down, but it's 149, well, 151 technically, starting on October 1st, which we are not at that. So hopefully by the end of the month, we'll be there. And then you start seeing it drop to 139 in January. And then by the end of February, it's down to 47. So there's a huge drop in February. They are maintaining the 80 leased units throughout April, as far as I can tell. And I don't know if there are any plans for them to move those individuals out or anything like that.
So we'll be transitioning them last because they are in a lease, and then they're not scheduled to start remodeling until late next year
In the C wing.
in the C wing.
That's really helpful and very helpful for the subcommittee, so thank you.
So is the same subcommittee that's working Sullivan demo going to work the Aviator demo?
I think to me, it goes hand in hand. It makes sense that way, but I can defer to Jessica if she'd have a different opinion. Yep, she is of the same mind.
Okay, so we got that one covered. Okay. Okay, anything else on the Aviator? Okay, data management issues. Seems like we've talked a bit about that, but what else do we need to raise for the group?
And our data person had to leave. I think the only thing, let me pull up my note, is making sure, and I think Sean already spoke to it, about the CE assessments and putting maybe a timeline on that. Oh, wait, she's online. Sorry, Celia's there. Sorry, Celia, I didn't know you were on virtual.
Yeah, sorry, I had a coughing fit and I figured, since COVID's still a real thing, nobody wanted me to be near them. So I decided to cough in my office.
So anything for the data management group? Oh, she's coughing.
I don't have anything to report back on this. I think the next phase is going to be to make sure that as the new facilities are put online or the management has changed over at the Sullivan, that all of that information is being adequately accounted for in the system, which I think we're well on the way to doing that. And then backstopping in some capacity with coordinated entry assessments to make sure that folks staying at the Sullivan are adequately prioritized.
There is good news I'd like to report is that this weekend we got the secured internet up and running for Henning so that they can actually have HMIS at the front desk. So yay.
Good job. Okay. Anything on the two communications topics for this week? Communications with the public and media, engagement with persons with lived experience, anything that's going on?
There's not an update about engagement with people with lived experience. There is a question for the task force, which is the communications subgroup has been doing community presentations to community councils in advance of the recommendations that were made to the Assembly Committee on Housing and Homelessness. As there are not any other new recommendations yet to be made, the question is, does the task force want to continue engaging with the public? And for instance, we received a request from Midtown Community Council for a presentation about the task force. Normally, the communication subgroup would go through the talking points that were developed in the subgroup and presented to the task force. But they're the same as they've been since when we presented to the Assembly meeting. So does the task force want to continue providing these presentations? Do they think it's useful? The only other point to bring up here is that the task force is not the place to receive public input on policy decisions. And I think what we encountered in our community council presentations was people really wanting to share feedback with the task force about the work of the task force and to try and change task force decisions or change the charter or make their own community recommendations, and felt that the task force presence was an avenue to share that kind of feedback. What the comms subgroup always did was to say the appropriate place to make this is at the Assembly, and with the Assembly Committee on Housing and Homelessness, please, attend those and make your opinions heard, or email, and give the correct avenue. So I think the question for the task force is, do we continue doing community outreach when there are no updates and give old updates, or do we pause public communications at this time?
So if no one from the task force has advice, I'll share my perspective, and that is, anytime we're working an effort like this, it is just as important to give an update that says, we haven't made any new decisions. The stuff that we talked about last time is either still in play or these things are off the table. Fill the vacuum. Because if you don't do something, they're gonna make it up. And they're gonna say, well, they didn't come talk to us and they're not being responsive. So I think it's better, even if it's just a very brief, here's where we are. We've got these properties now that we're looking at. It's gonna take us a little bit longer to come up with a recommendation. That would be my 2 cents. Don?
I could add to that too. We are, we have Alaska News Agency. We'll be looking at that. I mean, warehouses have not made the cut, but we're definitely going to look at it. The Arctic Rec Center ramped up a bit. And those, we want to get out ahead of that because word will get out and say, wait a minute, what changed? You didn't tell us. And that, as I said, you didn't tell me is often your biggest stumbling block. So I don't know what community council either of those is in. Taku Campbell and Arctic Rec Center, I don't know what that is. Oh, are you on the comms committee?
Yeah, sorry, I've just read something in the chat.
Okay.
I don't know where they fall in terms of community councils either.
So is it, are you, when they have those meetings, are you just speaking, you're just dialing in if they do Zoom and making a quick report?
I've gone in person when they have in-person meetings and Zoom when there's Zoom meetings.
Okay, so you'll go in person, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. So I would say at least figure out which ones those are in. And that's a light update, just let them know. Continue to look at these and new one came on. Is that a burden or is it, I haven't.
I guess, telling people that something might happen in their neighborhood also causes a lot of disruption when it is not a policy decision or a finalized thing. And is it the role of the task force to provide communications around policy things that are yet to be decided versus the role of, for instance, the assembly to make those communications available, or the mayor's office once they are decided by the assembly? So yes, I would say get out in front of it, but is it our role to get out in front of it if our role is to make recommendations?
I think you're not making policy communications. You're giving an update from the task force. You're not a policy maker. This task force is not a policy decision maker, but you can give an update on what the task force is doing.
Yeah.
And leave it at that. I'm just telling you where the task force is. We're not ready to make a recommendation. We're still looking at these sites, but we're, you talk to your assembly member about the policy.
Yeah.
I do see a hand, but I don't know who's there.
Allison, I can't tell who it is either.
Rob.
Mark, sorry, there's two Robs.
I don't know if this is, I hear what you're saying, Owen, and I hear what everybody's saying regarding it. That maybe little or no new information is better than nothing. I think my viewpoint, especially from my experience of going and in testifying, is whether it's coming from the task force or it's coming from the body of the coalition and all of the partner agencies. I think we have an uphill battle in trying to educate and advocate for the unsheltered citizens of Anchorage within the community. I think this whole process has bred, I think, maybe an unintended consequence of this going on for now 2 full summers is there's a lot of people with a lot of very strong negative feelings towards the unsheltered, and whether it's the task force or the coalition and the partners of the coalition, we need to counter that somehow and make the issue more personal, more manageable, and less of the NIMBY issues and all that. I just feel like we have to keep up pressure somehow.
Very good point, Rob. Thank you. I just think it's a great opportunity anytime you get a chance to go out and tell your story, and do it in a way, as Rob says, that makes it personal. And do it very strategically. I mean, for you coming from the coalition, be very strategic. How do you want to change public opinion over the next year? How can you use these opportunities to make steps in that direction?
I also think that it's one of the things we talked about when we presented last time, which is that we are actively engaging. Like, it was one of the things that we could say was a positive, is that, hey, we are out there, and doing something that wasn't necessarily maybe our role, but that the community even appreciated, and being able to tell people, hey, I don't have all the answers, but you can go to the task force website and look at when we press record. You can look at, those videos and hear the thoughts and consensus around the group. I've met a couple of folks who were like, thank you for sending me to the website, because I didn't understand your process. All I heard was this thing. And now I kind of understand a little bit better of what happened and how you got there. Didn't mean they still agreed, but they got, was a little less of a friction because they had a little more understanding. My question, or not my question, my comment is that next week is when we are supposed to have some recommendations, like next Wednesday. So really, I feel like as the pseudo Meg here, like we should have some of our recommendations kind of typed for our Monday meeting. Because those are to be presented on Wednesday, like it's that fast. So I am hoping to bother a lot of folks to get some things typed up so we can have a consensus on what's going to be given to the Housing and Homeless Committee on Wednesday. So that should help too, because you will have something on Monday. And maybe it is that, hey, Monday they're gonna come out with a draft, recommendation. And hopefully in that meeting on Monday, we get to the consensus of this is what we're presenting or what we're gonna hold off on.
It's a good idea.
Okay, what I'm hearing, feedback from the task force is that communications with community councils should continue and community presentations should continue regarding updates from the task force, or no updates, but present the lack of updates.
Explaining that we.
I think continuing with the knowledge that everything is always a moving target and that we may report on a tier 2 site that later will no longer be a viable site, and vice versa, something new may come on board after we have talked to you last.
Roger, I know you were trying to speak also.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry for talking over. If the only update we have is that we don't have an update, and here's why. We're waiting on the assembly meeting. We're waiting on what comes out of the feedback communications and stuff like that. That is an update. So yes, I concur. Can just continue.
Okay.
So what about the engagement with persons with lived experience, kind of communicating with the people who are currently in this situation? Is there any plans to provide communication with that group of residents about what's going on with the task force? Roger? Your hands up. You're on mute. Thank you, Roger.
Sorry, I'm currently continuing what communications I can into and out of Centennial Camp. So though I'm not staying there, I'm just there briefly, I still am in contact with the majority of the folks there and talking about the bright spots where they are. And there is some good stuff that we're working on and doing. So any flyers that anybody wants to send in or anything like that, let me know. Pop me an email or whatever, and I'll make sure that happens.
Thanks, Roger. So I know this was a really important issue to the task force when we kicked off this effort, was maintaining a line of communication with the folks who were most impacted by the emergency shelter plans. Is that still a priority for the task force? And if so, how are you going to manage that over the next few months? Or if you don't think it's for the task force, is somebody else doing it? Who was on that committee last time? I know Roger. Who else?
Julie.
Owen,
were you on that one?
That wasn't an official task. That was not an official subgroup. It was kind of the comms subgroup took it on in the form of an outreach survey. Okay. In what was desired from emergency shelter. And that was completed with the completion of that survey, but I don't know that that subgroup ever was an official subgroup. Roger, did you all meet as a subgroup I don't think so.
No, I think you're accurate. We were just kind of an aside to the comms. And making sure communication happened both ways, which, you know, my involvement there is going to make sure it happens one way or the other, but all the help I can get is appreciated. And especially if MASH or the guest house, if there was a flyer I can take into camp, explaining to folks what that is. And or what the opportunities are that they can try to establish or try to move as a social group instead of just individuals, or how that would work. So sorry to add complexity, but
yeah, I think what it originally was to get unsheltered input on emergency shelter. What we found was that unsheltered people were not willing to engage in this hypothetical conversation when their basic needs were not being met, and interacting in a very extreme power imbalance between a sheltered outreach worker and a person in a camping scenario. So we were able to get input, but all of the input, or 70 out of the 77 respondents, came from people who were staying in shelter and a little bit more stable and willing to sit down and have that kind of extended interaction to give input on the emergency shelter design. So I think it was intended in one way, and then it was implemented in another, which was a result of, I think, what we discovered.
so I'm sitting here literally making these tobacco pouches that I will carry with me into camp and get folks to have a reason to talk to me and let them know that somebody cares about them. And so, you know, hitting those base needs, if we can figure out what those are, when they are, and timing it so that we're making sure they get met for them, but then giving them reason to be more sociable, to be more engaging, to be more engaged, if you will. Is my thought and our approach for where I'm fitting in at the work task force right now. So I think it's important work. I think it's going to continue on my part regardless, but again, the more the merrier, and we'll get through this together with the folks we're serving. Thank you.
Thanks, Roger. So we'll fold that topic into the communications group, then, that it's still one of the items on your list. Okay, we'll fix that. Okay, are there any other issues or updates that we need to discuss before we start wrapping up today? So it seems like there's still a good bit of work to do. Definitely before you're in a position to make some recommendations. It looks like the kind of recommendations you're going to make next week are going to be, I'm guessing, are going to be less concrete. And so I think it might be good to maybe have a conversation with Meg after today's meeting and make sure we're on the same page in terms of expectations. And Felix as well. I should have a meeting with them later today.
Yeah, since we're ending a lot earlier, and if you guys have that time, I hope the subcommittee can stay on and we can maybe hash out some of the things that I was hoping to hash out during the meeting. So if we can, if you guys can stay, since we were supposed to go to 1:30, that would be great. Maybe we can hit the ground running and have some more to give back to Meg.
Which subcommittee?
For the demobilization of Sullivan and Aviator, since it's only 12:44 and I'd like to keep y'all to 1:30 if I can.
Okay.
I would say that the subgroups have not met in a recorded venue.
Have to be
So
recorded,
that if the meeting is ending, I will stop the recording,
Right,
and
yeah.
then the teams will stay open and we can continue to have a productive conversation regarding demobilization.
Thank you, Robert.
Yeah, because I think that's just a
Mhm.
working group session. It's not part of the task force. Okay.
I just didn't want them to leave when you said,
Yeah.
no, stay.
I am going to stop the recording, but anybody who's able to stay and discuss demobilization.
Well, I think Belinda had a couple
Oh.
more.
Yeah, I just wanted, so are there any of the other groups that want to use the time as well? speak up now so that you guys can convene and use the rest of the hour if you need to. John, your group is.
I think we'll probably have a meeting Wednesday or something. And if Jessica, if you're still on, it sounds like we need to get you at one of our meetings so we can talk about operations with various sites and.
Yep. Yeah, you guys can send me an invite to your next one, or just if you have it on a like series, you can just forward me the series and let me know which one. But I'm happy to attend and be the go-between on those two committees.
Great, thanks.
Okay. So we'll wrap up for today. I think the charging orders are to see what progress can be made and get some drafts of your committee updates and any potential recommendations to Taria. And this group will be reconvening on Monday next week. I will not be here, just to remind you, be traveling, but I'll get an agenda out before the end of the week. Okay, thank you, everyone. Appreciate you being here.
Thanks. We'll keep the other folks on.